Good evening. My name is Ellen Smith, and today I'll be presenting my dissertation prospectus, Motivating Students in World Language Through Critical Thought. This study explores how integrating critical thinking into upper-level Spanish instruction can influence student motivation, communication, and engagement. In many upper-level Spanish classrooms, students disengage when instruction is centered on grammar drills and vocabulary memorization. These methods often feel disconnected from real-world application, resulting in poor retention and low motivation. Although some pre-existing elements are understood about how implementation of critical thought lessons in English and EFL classrooms has improved student language acquisition, little is still known about how improved language acquisition might affect student motivation for continued language use, especially in Spanish classrooms at the high school level, such as where I teach. Therefore, my problem of practice is regarding the need for a curriculum that fosters both critical thinking and long-term motivation for language use in the high school Spanish classroom. This study asked 3 guiding questions. First, how does the inclusion of polemic topics in Spanish affect students' critical thinking skills? Second, how might critical consciousness lessons influence intrinsic motivation to continue studying Spanish beyond the classroom? And finally, how does engaging with critical thought affect students' willingness to speak publicly about their unique ideas and beliefs in Spanish? My theoretical framework is grounded in 3 interconnected ideas. Firstly, Nell Nodding's ethics of care, which emphasizes the importance of emotional safety and trust in learning environments. Deci and Ryan's self-determination theory identifies autonomy, competence, and relatedness as key drivers of intrinsic motivation. And lastly, Paulo Freire's concept of critical consciousness views language as a tool for questioning and addressing societal issues. Together, these theories support a curriculum that builds emotional connection, fosters interdependence, and empowers students to use Spanish for meaningful, real-world engagement. Nodding's ethics of care reminds us that students must feel safe and valued before they can take risks in learning. Deci and Ryan's self-determination theory explains that when learners are given autonomy and a sense of competence, they become more motivated from within, rather than relying on grades or external rewards. Freire's concept of critical consciousness pushes this even further, encouraging students to see Spanish not just as an academic requirement, but as a tool for questioning inequalities and participating actively in society. By weaving these perspectives together, the curriculum becomes personal, meaningful, and linguistically rigorous, as well as socially transformative. Purpose. The purpose of the study is to examine how embedding critical thought and consciousness into lessons for my Spanish foreign AP curriculums can impact student motivation, communication, and critical thinking. My goal is to bridge the gap between beginner storytelling curriculum, such as one such curriculum by Martina Bex called Somos, and the more abstract thematic rigor of the AP level Spanish work. This study also aims to help students sustain engagement and to see how Spanish can be relevant beyond the classroom. Positionality. But as both teacher and researcher, I play a dual role in this project. My position as a white, non-Latinx Spanish teacher means I must be aware of the privilege and limitations of my perspective. However, I am committed to building an inclusive, anti-racist classroom where students feel safe to explore sensitive cultural and societal topics. By centering students' voices and reflecting critically on my own biases, I aim to conduct this research ethically and responsibly. And by grounding the study in Nodding's ethics of care, I aim to create an ethical and accepting classroom where students feel safe, accepted, and validated so that authentic relationships can foster trust and open the door to deeper learning. Related research. Research shows that critical thought increases both proficiency and engagement in ESL and EFL contexts. For example, Marin and De La Pava in 2017 and Nangu in 2003 demonstrated these benefits. Additionally, Kajabi and colleagues in 2018 found that positive emotions and comfort increased students' willingness to communicate, WTC. However, there is still limited research on how these findings apply to U.S. high schools and Spanish classrooms, which is where my study is being conducted and how I contribute. Historical perspectives. Historically, language instruction has shifted from behaviorist models to more humanistic models and sociocognitive approaches, especially late in the 20th century. In 1983, Krashen and Terrell introduced the natural approach and this concept of comprehensible input, which suggests that students learn best when exposed to this slightly challenging but understandable language. In 1998, Blaine Ray's TPRS method added storytelling to increase fluency and retention. And more recently, Martina Beck's SOMOS curriculum, which we already mentioned, emphasizes culture and context for young learners, though it still lacks the depth needed for upper-level students. My study builds on these historical shifts by introducing critical thought into the advanced level classrooms. Social justice grounding. My work is also rooted in social justice, drawing from Frere's concept of critical pedagogy. I believe education should challenge inequalities and empower learners. In this curriculum, students will explore topics such as immigration, healthcare, race inequalities, and environmental issues. My goal is to encourage them to use Spanish not only as a tool for communication, but as a means of advocacy, civic engagement, and critical dialogue. In doing so, students develop stronger language skills and a deeper social awareness overall. Ideally, then they can take this language out into the world where they can speak publicly about their unique ideas and beliefs. Harkening back to question 3. Methodology. This is an action research study using a cyclical model of planning, acting, observing, and reflecting. The approach is qualitative with a focus on lived experiences and meaning making. I use both a phenomenological and a case study approach. These methods will allow for a rich understanding of how students experience the integration of the critical thought curriculum in their Spanish classroom. And I will also use grounded theory to triangulate the data from a larger group study. This will involve cyclical stems of open coding, axial coding, and selective coding. Sample and setting. This study will take place in a suburban high school in the southeastern portion of the United States. The student population is predominantly white and English-speaking, with approximately 6% of my student body being Hispanic. The focus is on my Spanish 4 Honors and AP split-level course with about 30 to 40 intermediate to advanced learners in total, although I expect only 20 to 30 of my students will participate. These students have limited exposure to authentic Spanish-speaking communities, making it especially important to connect their classroom experience to their real-world experience. Data collection methods and instruments. To collect data, I will use several instruments. Surveys before and after the intervention will measure changes in motivation and engagement. Semi-structured interviews will provide deeper insights into student perspective. Reflective journals, graded for completion rather than accuracy, will encourage student risk-taking in Spanish in accordance with SDT, and ongoing classroom observations will track comfort and participation. Additionally, 3 to 4 case study students will allow for more depth and breadth of the qualitative data within the study, but all elements will follow student motivational growth in greater depth across the course of the semester. Intervention. This intervention is a 16-week redesign of the existing Spanish 4 Honors and AP curriculum in my district. To begin with, in the pre-intervention phase, I'll collect student interest surveys at the start of the semester to learn about their personal and academic preferences. This information will help guide my lessons, particularly the needs-based vocabulary lessons. Equally important is building trust and creating emotional safety before introducing these controversial topics. I will also administer a pre-survey on motivation to establish a baseline for measuring change. Next, in the curriculum design phase, I'll adapt my Spanish 4 Honors and AP curriculum to include the critical and real-world issues. Alongside this, I will develop needs-based vocabulary lists that equip students to discuss those issues authentically and meaningfully. In terms of instructional strategies, I will use tools such as the Socratic Seminar, debates, free volunteer reading, and journaling in Spanish to push the curriculum forward. The goal is to keep activities low stakes and high reward and align with SDT, self-determination theory, so students feel motivated to participate without the pressure of grades, thereby reducing anxiety while promoting authentic communication. For data collection, I'll track student engagement through journals and classroom observations, analyzing them using grounded theory coding. In addition, I will conduct case study interviews and observations to monitor shifts in motivation and willingness to communicate. I will administer a post-survey to measure changes in motivation at the end of the 16-week intervention. Finally, in the ongoing cycle, I will reflect on results with the hope of finding increased motivation to speak publicly about their ideas and beliefs in Spanish. I will code emerging themes, record findings, and then adjust and re-implement lessons as needed. This cycle reflects the iterative nature of action research and is designed to foster continuous improvement. Rigor and trustworthiness. To ensure rigor and trustworthiness, I will triangulate data across surveys, journals, interviews, and observations. Member checks with students will help validate interpretations for accuracy. As the teacher researcher, I will use reflective journaling to track my own biases and positionality. Finally, case studies will provide deeper insight into individual student experiences, strengthening the credibility of my findings through more complete and comprehensive writings. In summary, my upper-level Spanish class learners often disengage when instruction lacks real-world relevance. This study explores whether critical thought lessons can improve motivation, communication, and critical thinking skills. Using an action research approach, I hope to find that students develop stronger intrinsic motivation, a greater willingness to communicate in authentic contexts, and improved critical thinking skills. Ultimately, the goal is for my students to see Spanish as a lifelong practical tool for civic participation and global engagement. Thank you for your attention to this research study. I look forward to answering any questions you all might have in regards to my work. Have a great evening.